Hello, my name is Darren Aitchison. I'm from Chicago, Illinois. I'm a student in the doctoral program of Disability and Equity Education, which is Disability Studies, which is a subfield of special education. Also a professor at Triton College. I teach the Intro to ABA course for registered behavior technicians. And I'm here to talk to you about what I couldn't bring to you today. I apologize I couldn't be in Rome. Hopefully I can be there next year. We're going to talk about modified design-based research to counter the school-to-prison pipeline here in the States. You see the words BCB after me, and it means I'm a behavior analyst. So we deal with the science of human behavior. The science of human behavior is built on the ground of something called functional contextualism. This is the idea that different things and different people mean different things in different contexts. Context can change things. So somebody who's a hero in one instance can be a villain in another context. Something that's very valuable in one context is not as valuable in another, has a totally different function or different meaning. And built on that science of functional contextualism is the applied science of applied behavior analysis, which centers on differential reinforcement, rewarding one behavior response class and not another, and using functional behavioral assessment to treat problem behaviors. We've made tremendous strides over the past 40 or 50 years, treating kids on the autism spectrum and with developmental disabilities. We're making strides in other areas as well. But moving on to the next floor is relational frame theory. This is the science of derived stimulus relations. So we can teach two direct stimulus relationships and get 4 derived for free. And built on the RFT is a science of psychological flexibility or acceptance and commitment therapy. We'll talk more about RFT and ACT in my next talk later in the conference. Today we're going to focus on ABA and restorative justice and what they can do to help each other. So there are 3 promising areas right now where ABA can be used to help our restorative practitioners around the world. There's this behavioral skills training to performance feedback to train people in restorative justice, using HPT and OBM to help them overcome barriers encountered in implementing programs. And what we're really excited about here in Chicago right now is the use of RFT and ACT to improve mediations between victims and the offenders. So what is restorative justice? Out there in Europe, you're a little bit further ahead than we are. But right now, there is no clear definition of what is and is not restorative practices. It's a young science. It's only been around since the 90s, 96, when Howard Zer's influential book, Changing Lenses, came out. So right now, there's not a clear consensus on what is and is not restorative. However, this creates problems in empirical research, because how do I measure something that's not clearly defined? But there are a few things that everybody seems to agree on, or everybody credible, in my book, agrees on. And first of all, people agree, everything on the left-hand side there, those 7 things, most people agree are restorative practices when they're done with integrity and fidelity. So new additions are crisis resolution and critical incident stress management. I just submitted a paper just yesterday using critical incident stress management combined with restorative justice. So I think there's some strides there in the future. People also agree on some guiding principles. We want to restore the damage. We want people directly involved to be there when the mediation takes place. We want to build and maintain a just peace. These are kind of wishy-washy. They're kind of pie in the sky, but they're well-meaning. We get a little bit more specific when we get our guiding values. We believe in encounter, amends, reintegration, and inclusion. I'll give you a chance to read those really quickly. So encounter, we want opportunities for the victims and the offenders to meet to solve the problem. We want them to truly make amends, not just force an apology. We want to reintegrate the victims and the offenders back into society. And we want everybody involved in the process of the problem to have a chance to be part of the resolution. Are all these things truly measurable? Not exactly. And therein lies part of the problem. So whenever I write a paper or submit a journal article, I always include my own definition of restorative justice because we don't have a clear one yet. So I agree with those aforementioned value statements and guiding principles with a few additions. We look at 2 crucial questions. Number 1, how is power used and who has that power? And who benefits from the application of that power and why? These answers drive my research, but also my interventions as well. But to my friends out there in psychology and applied psychology, the law of determinism still applies. There's still reasons why people do what they do, and the truth is still out there. My mentor right there, Dr. Ron Clausen, has a famous saying. He says, trust grows when agreements are made and kept. And I find nothing can be more true in our line of work doing mediations around the country and around the world. So I talked earlier about design-based research. I work in education. Design-based research is an educational model. It's based off of moms using other types of research, but basically we're refining our interventions. So we do one little mini study, make some adjustments, not too many. We want to stay scientific, make some more adjustments, and we keep refining it until we get what we want. So I talked about earlier, we're using design-based research with verification. So I'm using single subject design or single case design at every step along the way of my design-based research project. And I'll show you more about that as we go along. So this is our overall design-based research document for our whole study we're going to talk about today. Those are our 5 different iterations, our mini studies. And again, we have a single subject or single case graph for every step along the way. So we start with our overarching pedagogical questions. And those questions are, can teachers improve their positive interactions with students if they're trained in integrity and fidelity in school-based restorative programs? And will teachers improve their implementation of restorative practice if they're trained in a gradual and stepwise fashion? And will the use of restorative practices in the classroom actually improve academic instruction, which is something every school is looking for? So let's start with iteration 1. It appeared last year, about a little over a year ago, in the Internet Journal of Restorative Justice. The citation is there. It's also available on Amazon. If you just type my name in there, you can find it pretty quickly. So we had 3 elementary students in the study, 1 white, 1 black, and 1 Hispanic. We used performance feedback in the Victim Offender Reconciliation Program as part of our intervention, and we measured the number of discipline referrals per month. And I'll show you the results here. This is our graph directly from the study. So everything to the left of that white line is the baseline. Going to the right of that staggered solid line is intervention. As you can see, we took them from each kid gradually from about 10 to 15, sometimes 20 times getting kicked out of class a month to 0 or 1. Now people look at this and they get the wrong idea. They say, wow, you really changed kids' behaviors. No, we didn't. We changed teacher behaviors. We gave teachers better tools, more effective tools, more moral tools, and that's what really turned the tide. But the school was very resistant. That's why you could only work with 1 kid at a time. So what did we learn from phase 1? For these 3 kids, the restorative justice intervention, the mediations were much more effective and far less costly, both in work hours and in actual spending, than the punitive system the school had in place. And the kids also missed a lot less school. And again, we changed the adult approach as opposed to children's behavior. Iteration 2 is currently in peer review in the Journal of Educational Design Research. If you have any friends from Germany, please speak with them to speed up the process. No, I'm just kidding. But we started with this iteration study. We took 2 female educators in their first year. We used performance feedback and behavioral engineering model. We used VORP again, the Victim Offender Reconciliation Program. This time we added a piece of discipline that restores, which is a curriculum invented by Brian and Roxanne Clausen out in Fresno, California. This is a behavioral engineering model. This will be in the slides from the download you'll be able to get after the conference is over. But this is essentially a functional assessment of a entity, of a workplace, of an organization, in this case, a school district. So this is our changing criterion design, our single case graph for this iteration of the study. We again have a demonstration of a functional relation, because whenever we challenge them to meet a higher and higher number of positive interactions per interval, per 5-minute interval, they met that. There's a stronger case for A than B, but we met the criteria for a functional relation in both cases. For those of you who are not as familiar with applied psychology, a functional relation means that it's likely that the intervention was responsible for the change in behavior. We also took some ancillary educational data. And it's only correlated at this point, but it's very promising. So we can't say that the restorative practice was responsible for this, but it was the only major change during the year. So we can at least say that it didn't hurt academics, which is something that a lot of people claim here in the States. A lot of teachers claim to me that they don't have time to do restorative or social emotional learning, and that it takes away from their instructional time, but this evidence is starting to prove otherwise. This is what we just talked about. So we go to phase 3. It's part of the same study, also in the EDER journal. This time we had 3 more experienced educators. We used behavioral skills training. This time instead of the BM, we used the SAM. We use the same discipline that restores. But this time we measured teachers' integrity to the model of the restorative practices. So this is the SAM, a little bit more complicated than the VEM. It's invented by Tony Marker out at Boise State. So this is our steps with correct teaching. So the dots represent the percentage, the correct percentage of steps they're using with the discipline that restores model. So again, this is a range of unchanging criteria. So instead of that one line, we have a range where we continually challenge teachers to be better and better. And again, they met their expectations. Again, I have a stronger case for the first case than the latter, but I do have evidence of a functional relationship for both participants. So, so our training resulted in them getting better and better at doing restorative practices in the classroom. So we learned that the behavioral skills training was more effective in cost and in time. It was cheaper and faster than the performance feedback. The full implementation of classroom DTR, that school restorative justice, was very effective in these classrooms. And we also found that people were much more receptive to tracking teacher fidelity than the teacher positive and negative interactions. And the synchronized analysis model was more in depth, gave us more actionable knowledge than the behavioral engineering model. And at this time, we don't know if the restorative practice changed academic instruction for the better, but it appears to have a positive impact. And just as in phase one, the above populations felt they were much less stressful. Everybody reported that things were much more peaceful. People were happier at work. And they were much less stressful at school, excuse me. So now I get to phase four. This is where things start to get really exciting. This is where you implement, well, let's go to the next slide first. So we have 5 tenured white educators, 4 male and 1 female. We use behavioral skills training and the synchronized analysis model. We use the school restorative justice, but this time we combine it with the good behavior game, which is an evidence-based classroom management strategy at the tier 1 level. We measure the number of 3-second intervals that kids were on task. This time we use reversal designs and a parallel treatments format. And our graph is the same again, same location, so this is the same SAM as before. So these are 3 different classrooms measured in real time and randomized time intervals. And this time we have a greater scientific understanding. We don't have functional relationship, we have experimental control because we can turn the behavior on and off. When we reward them, when we differentially reinforce the behavior, they do it. When we don't reinforce it, they don't. And that's where, as you see here, that's where you're returning to baseline. So that's a good behavior game with the restorative justice, with DTR together. There's huge potential for RJ and ACT. We'll talk about that later. So this is iteration 5. This is what we're really, really, really excited about here in the States. This is the final phase of our study. So when I showed you that design-based research document earlier where you keep refining, we keep spiraling and spiraling until we get to what we want, this is what we want. So we use behavioral skills training, the synchronized analysis model, the good behavior game with the HERO procedure, I'll explain that in a minute, and the discipline that restores. So this is the true Cadillac of the intervention. So this is our graph. So this graph is a little bit tricky. But this is different teachers, but the same group of students. So the top line is a general education classroom. The second line is PE. Third one is science. Fourth one is social studies. So these kids traveled to different teachers during the day. So we're able to demonstrate experimental control across teachers with the same group of students. So this is some profound impact here. So not only do we demonstrate that the intervention was responsible for the kids' positive change in behavior, doing more work and paying more attention in class, but this leads us to suggest something that we've been saying in behaviorism for a long time. The personality of the teacher doesn't always matter so much. It's the efficacy of the intervention. It's the functions, it's the contingencies of reinforcement and punishment that you have in place on the individual and the group level. The other really nice thing here is we were able to implement the HERO procedure with one of these students who was somewhat resistant to the good behavior game. That's where you have one student who just coincidentally gets enough points to put the class overboard, or we put him in positive situations where he gets respect from the class, where he earns points for the class. We're able to stop that kid from getting an intervention behavior support plan. So we're able to, which was much more cost effective for the school. So again, we learned that the GBG, the good behavior game with the DTR, the school-based restorative justice, together was the most powerful and potent of the interventions that we used. And again, the HERO procedure helped us to have the difficult student not get a behavior plan. So these are just some of the numbers over the last 7 or 8 years. Either myself or somebody who's been trained by Dr. Clausen or someone that I've trained myself, we're about 85% successful with these one-on-one mediations, which we'll talk about more in the next talk, as compared to about 30% is the punitive measures. So we're about 60% more effective and about 80% more cost effective. Because kicking kids out of school and suspending kids and expelling kids is a very costly thing in the long run, which we'll talk more about. It's another talk for another time. So just in conclusion quickly, the two most exciting aspects of research between ABA and restorative justice right now are the combination of restorative practices with the good behavior game and the use of ACT and RFT to improve victim offender mediations, which again, we'll talk about later on in the conference in my second talk. So if anybody has any questions, I would love to hear them. Obviously, I can't be there in person, but this is my email. It's dhsn@my.nl.edu. That's National Louis University. So please send me an email. Please tell me what you think. If you have some ideas, I'm looking for people around the world to help me finish my dissertation, to do similar stuff like this in other places. Thank you for your time. I'm honored to be here, and have a good day.